All right, good afternoon and welcome to our Florida Land Steward webinar about the Land Yield Forest Carbon Program. This is a second in a series that we're doing about carbon programs, some of the carbon programs that are active in Florida and the Southeast. Over the last few years, I've noticed and met some folks that are involved in carbon programs and they were new to me. I thought I had a handle on them about 5 years ago, and we've had some new ones come along since we focused on carbon programs back around 2020 or 2021. So I'm having to revamp the carbon program education for me, and of course for our audience as well. So I thank you for joining the webinar today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, for those that don't know me, my name is Chris Demers. I run our Florida Land Steward Extension program here at the University of Florida IFAS School of Forest Fisheries and Geomatic Sciences. And the mission of our program is essentially to share information and networking services with private landowners across the state of Florida. We also have landowners in neighboring states like Alabama and Georgia that are tied into the program as well. So we welcome everyone. And if you want to get connected with our program and our services or resources, you can get a hold of me or visit our website. I'll be sharing some a website link here pretty soon, so you can find our website. Chances are you've heard about this webinar via our Land Steward updates that are sent once a week. I'm joined today by Mr. Max Grodnick. He's head of sales and marketing with the LandYield program, and he'll be sharing most of the information today about his program. I want to encourage everyone to participate via asking questions and discussion via the chat link that's on your interface, your Teams interface, or the question and answer if that appears. I understand the question and answer function doesn't always appear, so feel free to use the chat if the Q&A button isn't there. And we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. And again, I want to encourage you to participate in our after survey that will be available after the presentation. I'll have a QR code there after the presentation, and I'll be sending a link out tomorrow that goes to that survey. So if you can fill that out and give us some feedback, some impacts to share about your participation in the webinar, that would be really helpful. It's very, very quick, just a few questions. The presentations, slides, as well as the link to the LandYield website is available on our materials website, on our program website there. The link is there. And you can find that on our homepage. If you're looking at our homepage, that's where it's located there at the that last paragraph on the program description right on our homepage. You can find all the recordings, links, and materials to our webinars, as well as materials that we share at events. Those are all available online for downloading. So you can access the presentation materials there. If you have any questions, just send me an email or give me a phone call. All right, well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we will hand it over to Max so he can share his presentation slides. Go ahead, Max, you can share.
Hello, everybody. My name is Max Grodnick. As Chris said, I lead sales and marketing here at LandYield. I'm really the go-to person for landowners to learn about our program. We have a relatively small group here today. So, if any of you guys have, questions specifically about your property, hopefully we can get to them today. And if not, we can always find time to speak one-on-one. As Chris mentioned, these carbon programs get started showing up in Florida around, maybe 5 years ago. Forest carbon programs in general, projects in general, have been around for about 2 decades. But historically, these projects were a lot larger in size. needed tens of thousands in order to make the economically viable. But advancements in remote sensing technology over really the last 5 or so years have kind of enabled a transformation in the carbon project development. So we started our company about 4 years ago, really building off of those advancements in remote sensing technology. So we can now use satellite imagery and LiDAR, which is how we do our project development, to develop projects as small as 40 acres. So we'll get into all the program details here, but that's kind of where we've emerged. And then at the same time, of course, natural climate solutions have also helped expand popularity of these carbon programs as more large corporations than ever are investing in carbon credits. So we're seeing a lot of interest on the demand side. And so our job as project developers is to meet that on the supply side. So what we look to do is take lots of smaller landowners and bundle them together into a larger project. So our flagship project is this one in the southeast, of which Florida is a part, along with 12 other states. And so we take lots of smaller private forest land and we bundle them together into a much larger project encompassing tens of thousands of acres, which allows us to generate the quantity of credits that these large companies want to buy. So getting into how our program works. The LandYield program, it's a harvest deferral program. So we pay landowners not to harvest their timber. In order for an acre to be eligible for our program, the timber has to be mature enough that you could harvest it. So generally, usually that would start around, 15 to 20 years in age, give or take. And then we do offer flexible enrollment. So it's entirely up to you as the landowner for what areas you want to do a project. It's a minimum of 40 acres to enroll, but beyond that, it's entirely up to you. So we really like to think of a carbon project as a tool in your forest management planning. So it's really about thinking about what your long-term plan is for each stand and seeing, are there stands that you're comfortable and capable of doing an extended rotation time on, and then exploring whether that makes sense for a carbon project. So we're able to fully customize your project to the specific needs of your forest. And again, we can talk about that more specifically with each of you if that's of interest. Our program itself, it is a 40-year program, and we break it into two 20-year periods. So the first 20 years is the commercial harvest deferral. So it's no timber harvesting for 20 years. Now, there are some exceptions to this, and we'll get into them a little bit more, but effectively, you're making a 20-year commitment to not do any commercial harvesting. After that first 20 years are up, we then move into a choice period for the second 20 years, where you can either continue with another 20-year harvest deferral and keep earning carbon revenue, or if you want to start doing selective harvesting, you will begin to have that option where you could choose to selectively harvest the growth from that second 20-year period. We just have to make sure we maintain the volume of the forest as it is in year 20. We hold that volume through year 40, but you could then selectively cut the growth back down to that year 20 level. And in this way, we are ensuring that we are storing the total volume in the forest through 40 years. So we're making a 40-year commitment to keep your forest intact. And then we're really only concerned with the timber, other non-timber activities, whether that's hunting, leasing, or collecting non-timber products like pine straw. All of that is compatible with our program, agroforestry as well. So the name of the game in setting up a forest carbon project is additionality. So we're able to generate carbon credits for all of the additional carbon that is being stored in your forest. So a carbon credit, one carbon credit is for 1 ton of carbon stored. And so what we do is we calculate two scenarios. So we look at this chart here. And so what we're calling here as the activity baseline, we also call it as kind of the business as usual scenario. And so we're doing an analysis of how much carbon would be stored in your forest if you're acting as a kind of economically rational actor where you are doing timber harvest, selective harvest, or some clear cuts every few years or so. And so that's kind of tracking here what's going to be the total carbon volume that is stored in that business as usual scenario. And then we calculate an alternative scenario, which is what if you're following the guidelines of our harvest deferral program and agreeing to extend rotation times. And so in this scenario, instead of the carbon storage dropping down with harvest, it just continues to grow over time. And then we look at the difference, at the delta between those two scenarios, and that here is the area highlighted in yellow, and that's the additionality. And so this is the area for which we're able to generate and issue carbon credits. So one question we're often asked is, why can't we, generate credits for early growth? Young stands, early growth are absolutely sequestering carbon, but in either scenario, that's happening. So there's nothing additional that is happening during those early years. Even if you plan to harvest at kind of the first possibility, we're still losing that carbon storage. So we're only able to generate the credits for the additional carbon. When we talk about kind of our program, and I was saying kind of what are some of the exceptions or where is some of the flexibility. So within that first 20-year period, you are making a commitment to not do any commercial harvesting. That doesn't mean that you can never cut a tree down. So there are some exceptions. You can harvest up to 2%, either 5 acres or 2%, whichever is less of your forest area. If you need to make a clearing to put in, traditionally a house site or a food plot, there's a little bit of flexibility there. You can also harvest up to 5 cords of firewood each year. You can do timber stand improvements, you can do prescribed burns, you can clear out the understory, you can do timber health treatments if there's an outbreak, infestation, if there's an invasive species. So you can still continue to manage the health of your forest. Again, it's really just making a concerted commitment to keep that area in place. And then as well, when we talk about the flexibility, it's understanding that you also get to decide what portions of your property make sense. I know that there are a lot of southern pine in Florida, and we do have lots of landowners who decide that a 20-year harvest deferral is too long for their pine stand. And so we've often done projects where we just look at hardwood stands, and we can just develop a bespoke project around that area. So we've done that many times, and we could certainly look at that if it makes sense for your property. We are following a methodology that was created by the American Carbon Registry. So it is specifically for small, non-industrial private forest landowners. We can do projects as small as 4,000 acres. There is an upper limit of 5,000 acres. So if a landowner owns more than 5,000 acres of forest, they would not be eligible for our program under this methodology. And this methodology is built specifically for using the remote sensing technology approach. And so it's a first of its kind in this way, and it really kind of unlocked the carbon market for smaller landowners. And so I was speaking a little bit about this earlier, but this is really what motivated us to start our company and build this business, is to connect carbon market and carbon revenue with smaller landowners. I believe the statistic is that 40% of forest land in the US is owned by this class of private, often family forest owner. And so it's important to make sure that as the carbon market continues to grow, that these private family forest owners, who are so important to the health of our nation's forests, are being able to participate in carbon projects, and really the advancements in remote sensing technology enable significant development costs and pay land more money and make this a really competitive and opportunity for forest stands.
Hey, Max, I'm going to interrupt you just a
Oh,
second.
please. I
Um,
appreciate that.
you might want to turn your camera off to preserve some bandwidth.
Okay.
Your audio is a little bit choppy, and cutting your camera could help that. Just suggestion.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. Let me know if there's a specific topic or something that I cut out on and I should circle back to. Otherwise,
O-
I'll go ahead.
Okay, very good. Yeah, it sounds. I think it sounds better now. So.
Okay. Apologies for my internet issues here. We will carry on. Um, so we talked about some of these things as far as the customization and flexibility of setting up your project. We really pride ourselves in paying landowners as much revenue as we can generate. So we pay landowners 55% of the price of their carbon credits. We'll get a little more into that in another slide here, but understanding that, as we know, there's real value in your forest. And historically, the real way to realize that value is harvesting timber. But as we know, there's also a lot of real value in keeping that forest land intact. So carbon in general is a great way to realize and appreciate that, and have an option for landowners who really want to keep their land forested. Maybe they're using it primarily for hunting or recreation. And so this is a great way to again incentivize it and allow landowners to continue to do that. And in that way, it can also, we have lots of landowners in our program who do that. So again, just opening up another revenue stream that might make sense for your property. What kind of differentiates LandYield from others in this space is just the quality of our credits. We talked about how these are verified by the American Carbon Registry. So these are very kind of in-demand, high integrity, or even you could think of them as blue chip credits. And so the large corporations that invest in carbon projects and buy carbon credits are often willing to pay a premium for these credits, knowing that these are, certified American forestry carbon credits. We also, as I mentioned before, we pay more than most of the other developers out there. We also pay more often. So we have quarterly payments, and those start as soon as you sign up. So it can take us, a year to 2 years to actually get the credits and sell them, but we are confident that we're going to be able to do that. And so we start paying you right away. So as soon as you're signed up, you'll start getting quarterly payments, and we amortize the payments. So you get paid for the same number of credits every quarter. And then the first 3 years we pay at a fixed rate, and then starting in the fourth year, your payments are tied to the market price. So that way, as this market continues to grow and the credits become more valuable, your revenue increases as well. And the last thing is that we act as the project proponent. So we handle everything as far as setup and getting the credits issued and verified. So we really try to make it as simple for landowners as we can. The way that we do our monitoring and reporting is a mix of self-reporting with the landowners filling out a quarterly attestation form each quarter before they get paid. And we then do remote verification where we update our satellite image twice a year to double check and make sure that there haven't been any disturbances on the ground. So together we're able to kind of simply manage the project. And these projects, they can take a little bit of work in the setup, but once they're kind of in place, it's really not too big of a lift for landowners to give us a quarterly check-in. And otherwise we kind of take care of the rest. So really try to keep things simple. As far as setting up your site, we do everything online with the remote sensing. So we built our own online platform. You have a picture here of the map, and so we again we use satellite imagery and LiDAR, and we get all of the parcel data from the Forestry Service, or from the counties, I should say. And you can go on there and look up your property, and our platform then does an analysis of your forest and will let you know exactly what areas of your. So if we look at this map here, we can see that the areas highlighted in light green are everywhere that our system is identifying forest that is mature and eligible for our program. So it has the necessary volume and density and maturity to be eligible for our program. And then within that, you can decide what parts of your property you want to put in. So in this example here, the yellow section is anything within this person's 3 parcels or 2 parcels that are eligible for our program. And we then calculate a customized revenue estimate for that section. And we then have tools on this platform if you need to make any customizations to this area. So if you know that there's a section that you want to leave out to harvest, or you have plans to develop that area, or maybe you're planning on potentially selling that portion at one point, we can make changes to the map using our tool. If we need to do things that are highly customized, we can always create a KML file to create something that's very bespoke. And certainly if you have any questions or need any technical assistance with this, this is a lot of what our team does, is help you figure out how to set up your project in the way that makes the most sense for your property. And then just when back up here, what we need as far as setting up these projects is, I like to think of it as it's 2 things. It's the map. So we just kind of looked at that. It's identifying what areas of your property you want to put in, and then it's uploading your ownership documents. So that's, your recorded deeds and tax bills. If your property is owned by an LLC, we want to see the operating agreement and make sure you have the rights to sign. But if your property is owned by an LLC or a trust or any kind of unique ownership structure, it's still most certainly eligible for our program. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions as well. What makes a good carbon project? So I kind of hinted at this a little bit, but hardwoods in general are a great fit. Pines can be a tougher fit for our program because of the 20-year harvest deferral and the way that a lot of pines are often managed. Often a better fit and more challenging because the rotation times are longer. And so it really is just about finding, what are your needs for your forest? What are your management objectives? And does an extended rotation align itself with that stand? And could carbon be a great way to generate revenue and support that? The other thing to think of with what makes a good carbon project is I like to think of what I call the 3 F's. So there's forest, which we just kind of talked about again. What areas within your property make sense? But the other 2 things are family and financial. So to talk about family, what is kind of your long-term plan for the property? 40 years is a really long time, and it becomes a multi-generational decision. So, projects that tend to, or properties that tend to make for good projects are properties where, maybe it's been in the family for a long time, or there's a succession plan in place and a vision for what's going to happen to the long-term health of the property. When landowners, say, I don't even know if I'm going to own this property in 5 years. Well, that's usually, reason to pause and say probably doesn't make great sense for a carbon project. But when well, the plan is for my children to inherit this property, and I want to make sure that they're able to cut that while keeping the forest intact and having it be, a beautiful place for the children and the grandchildren to continue to enjoy and pass it along to the next generation. Carbon becomes, can often be a great part of it. And then the third F is the financial aspect. And so it's thinking about, does the revenue that the carbon project's generating, does that make sense with your financial plans? Can you forego if you're expecting timber revenue, how does that align, replacing that with carbon revenue? Or is everything kind of, taken care of anyway, and all revenue is additional? Oftentimes the revenue from a carbon project is not really exactly life-changing money, usually in the 4 to 5 figures of annual payments, but certainly still a very nice source of additional revenue, and usually more than offsets, taxes and kind of upkeep and expenses. So understanding, what is the value? Does this make sense? And again, to find out exactly what the specific carbon value for your property is, you can go on our website, use our mapping tool, and look up your property specifically. So we talked a little bit about how simple it is to sign up. The first step is going onto our platform, looking up your property, starting your site, getting that revenue estimate. We're kind of doing the program evaluation here, but also happy to answer any specific questions. And then again, it's all done online, and so it's out pretty simple. Once you're having together as far as your ownership documents and you know what areas you want to put into your project, you would site for review into the review period with our team, which tends to take about 2 to 3 weeks. And we just kind of look over the deeds, check everything, make sure that there's no eligibility issues, and that all of our calculations are lined up. The date that you submit your site for review, that becomes your project start day and the date from which you actually start accruing carbon revenue. So even if the review process takes a little longer, you're still earning revenue during that time. And when we start the review process, we will also send you sample contracts for you to review as well. Once your site is approved, we then can discuss the contract with you. And once you've approved that and let us know that you want to move forward, we then put together specific contracts for signature. And once we get those signed and filed away, you'll start earning your payments in the next quarter. One thing I should mention about the way that we set up these carbon projects is that we do use a timber deed. And so with that, we are carving out the timber rights for the specific area that's going to go into the carbon project, and letting it know that the timber rights for that area are being held by the carbon project for the 40 years of the project. And so the timber deed itself is then filed in the county clerk's office and is tied to the land itself. So that does mean that you can easily sell or transfer the property, and the carbon project will transfer along with that. That was everything that I had, and I haven't looked to see if there are any questions, but I hope that there are some. And Chris, if you want to fire them away, that'd be great.
Okay. Looks like we've got one question in the chat here. Dave Norton is asking, what is the minimum acreage? It looks like that was answered already by Josh Faines. 40 acres.
Yeah. So it's yeah. I'll just speak to that. So minimum acreage is 40 acres, and that would be for eligible forest land, but that can come across all of your property. So if you own multiple parcels, each of which has less than 40 acres, we can combine them together to get to that 40 acre number. And we can combine parcels. They don't have to be adjacent. They don't even have to be the same county. So when they're sitting with the same ownership, we're able to piece the project together across different parcels. Ultimately, we need 40 acres of mature eligible forest, but piece that to get smaller stands.
Okay, and then we have a question. Looks like Josh is answering, helping to answer some of these questions.
Oh yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Well, I'll just add as we're kind of approaching the end here. If you have specific questions about your property, or you need any help kind of getting set up or starting, give us a call. Our number's on here. Shoot us an email. Love to speak with you and happy to help you Thanks for.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Max is having some more internet issues, but thanks. We really appreciate everybody coming in and listening to our spiel. I think the only question in the chat that I haven't answered yet is whether we have success layering these projects with conservation easements. And the question is that the answer is that yes, we can do a carbon project with a conservation easement, but it sort of depends on the language of the conservation easement. So we can't create and sell carbon credits on timber that's already been legally protected and conserved. So if the easement stipulates certain kinds of harvesting practices or prohibits timber harvesting, we cannot do a carbon project. If the easement allows for pretty open-ended timber harvesting, then it is a possibility that we could still do a carbon project there. Chris, I hope you don't mind if I just go through these questions as they come up here.
Yeah, please do, Josh. That's great. I appreciate you jumping on.
There is a penalty for breaking the lease if you stop the project early, if you terminate the project early.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. If you terminate the project early, what happens is LandYield is on the hook with the carbon registry to replace all the carbon credits that have been produced from the project to date. So each credit that we sell is basically a commitment to the company that's buying it, that ton of carbon is going to be held until the end of the project. And this has to do with trying to offset a ton of emissions, which, when you emit a ton of carbon dioxide, it stays in the atmosphere for a period of time, some decades. So if a project is terminated early, we have to replace those credits with other credits for the registry. So there is an early termination fee that's associated, and that's outlined in our agreements, the way that works. Leslie asked which companies are buying these credits and why. It's a assortment of companies. I mean, a lot of Fortune 500 companies are buying carbon credits. You would certainly recognize most of the names, everyone from the financial sector to the tech sector to airlines. The reason they're doing it is to try to offset their emissions, and I think it's so they don't feel responsible for climate change, and they're doing it voluntarily. We only sell credits into the voluntary carbon market. There's two carbon markets, basically. There's the compliance markets that are created by government regulation. Those exist in Europe, China, and California, and some other states have now joined the compliance market that California started. We do not sell credits into those markets. We sell credits voluntarily. So it's just companies that want to do this to meet their own emission reduction goals buy these credits. I'm sure people have seen probably announcements in the media. If you haven't, you could Google them, but you can see where companies have committed to be net zero by 2030 or 2050 or whatever it might be. What they're saying is they're going to net out their emissions, which usually involves reducing their direct emissions, but also offsetting some of their emissions by buying high quality credits from people like us. Next question was what happens if LandYield goes out of business at some future date? The answer to that is that it is written into our contracts that if LandYield dissolves, goes bankrupt, goes out of business, the projects are terminated and your contracts are terminated. So all timber rights revert back to the landowners.
Looks like we've got some more questions coming in.
Leslie's asking if there's any possibility that governmental policy funding would change and negate this incentive. I mean, I guess anything is possible. Right now, the markets, as I mentioned, are voluntary. They're completely free and open markets. They're not government regulated and they're not government funded. So I would say no. I don't, it's hard to predict the future with the government, but right now, no, I think is the short answer to that question. Stephen Folsom asks, how are reductions from natural disasters handled? Which is a great question. So every time we issue carbon credits, which we issue about once a year from each project we have. Every time we issue credits, a certain percentage is taken off the top and put into what's called a risk buffer pool that ACR, the carbon registry, manages. The percentage is dictated by a project-specific carbon risk rating, which has to do with its propensity to natural disasters and exposure to pests and disease. So it's usually around 12%, something like that. So we take those right off the top. We put that into a risk buffer pool, which is essentially an insurance pool. And if a project goes into a reversal, we call it, where the carbon is lost due to a hurricane or fire, that is covered by that risk buffer pool. Depending on, how complete the reversal is or how complete the damage to the forest is, that may be a termination event. That may be the end of the project, or we may just have to recalculate, the growth rates and carbon sequestration going forward, and sort of recalculate your payments. But landowners are not responsible for reversals from natural disasters. So good questions. No, we do not sell. LandYield does not sell any stock in the company. But I'm flattered that you would want to invest in us, Leslie.
Okay. Max, if you could stop sharing your screen, I'm going to go ahead and put up my my slides with the evaluation link and some of my closing slides. If anyone has more questions that you want to put in chat, go ahead and do that. We can still stay on and answer questions. Happy to stay on for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you guys for the good feedback. Max did a great job despite technical challenges. And yeah, I'll just wrap up by saying we try to take a really personal approach with landowners. We know that people's forest land is very important to them and their families, and we take it seriously. We try to get to know the folks that we're working with. We see this as a long-term partnership with forest owners. So we want to make sure people understand all the various aspects of the carbon program and what they're signing up for before we enter into a long-term agreement. So if folks are interested in learning more, I really suggest going to our website and reading some good information we have there. We have a big FAQ section where it addresses all the most common questions we get from landowners. We also have some great blogs that explain how voluntary carbon markets work, how carbon credits are priced, more on corporate commitments and why they buy these kind of credits. So you might find some of that reading interesting.
All right, great. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you being on the webinar today as well to help out.
Well, we really appreciate you inviting us, Chris. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to echo the thanks that David Norton shared with you for your tree farm donation. LandYield provided some support for our Florida Tree Farm of the Year tour that took place back in November. I think some of you may have attended that tour. LandYield was one of the sponsors of that event, so that's what
We're
Dave
happy.
Norton is referring to.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right. Well, not seeing any new questions at this point. I'm going to go ahead and go through some of my closing slides. Up on the screen there, I want to encourage everyone to, if you've got a cell phone, handy mobile phone device, you can scan that link right there. Put your camera up to that, and that'll take you to the link where you can fill out a quick evaluation, a form evaluation. Give us some feedback on that, and kind of just some impact questions about how many acres you might be managing, owning, and things like that, and how useful this presentation was for you. I do want to echo that the recordings, the presentation slides, and the link to LandYield site will be available on our on our materials website, on our program site at that link right there. I'm going to go ahead and keep that that QR code link up there for a little while so people have a chance to access that evaluation before I go to our closing slides. Looks like Max is typing something. All right. Yeah, no, hey, thank you, Max, for being on the webinar and presenting today. I apologize also for the technical difficulties. Certain things with these webinars is we don't have control all the time of the technologies and bandwidth and things like that. So I appreciate your time with it. You did a good job.
Great.
And again, if anybody has any further questions for Max or Josh or myself, you can email us. Our contact information will be on the slides there that you can access, and you know how to get a hold of me. So just go ahead and email me, and I can forward your questions on to Josh and or Max as needed.
Yep. And anybody can always email us at info@landyield.com.
Excellent. All right, I'm going through our closing slides again. That's our homepage, what our homepage looks like, and the materials can be accessed from that link right there at that last paragraph right there. Recordings, links, materials for upcoming and past events. I want to thank all of our partners and supporters that make our Florida Land Steward outreach events and resources possible. Every year we partner closely with all these organizations that are up on the screen right now. They support us either financially or through sharing information resources. A lot of these partners are providing programs throughout the years for landowners, and they keep us posted about those opportunities. And likewise, we help to get the word out about their programs. Florida Tree Farm, as Dave Norton has mentioned in there, the Florida Tree Farm program is an important partner and link with this landowner community each year, and we're proud to be a part of that network as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us. If there's no further questions or comments, we can go ahead and conclude. Max and Josh, if you guys could stay on after I end the meeting, that would be great. We can close things up. But in terms of the webinar for today, we are concluded, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And we'll have our next webinar, our next Forest Carbon Program webinar next week on January, January 21st. That's Wednesday, and we'll be looking at the FUNGA, Forest Soil and Carbon Program. So that'll be really interesting. So we look forward to seeing y'all back here on the 21st for that webinar. And again, we'll be recording that one as well. So if you can't attend the webinar, we'll have it available on demand as we will this one. All right, and I will be forwarding the survey via email tomorrow, so y'all can access that. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we'll be seeing you down the road at an event or at a webinar this year.